only creatures privy to facts find the facts disturbing. Whereas a creature of acts, let us say right quick to get it started, those that might populate the primary domain. But if we were talking about creatures of acts, whereas if they found an act disturbing, they would do something about it. You understand, we were right quick talking about creatures of facts and creatures of acts. And I started out saying that only those creatures privy to facts then turn right around and find the facts disturbing. But if we were talking about in our isolated, arbitrary way in which we're damn sure doing again, they can't stop us. Free Albania. We'll talk like that if we want to. A creature of acts, should they find an act disturbing, they do not have to up with it put. They will move on it. They will act. The alternative being you can figure out yourself. I guess we should find an Albanian term for law and theorem and et cetera, since none of these actually fit into the civilized three-dimensional definitions of laws and theorems and et cetera. I guess maxim's always safe because that sounds like you may not know what you're talking about, or you could be a dead spirit of a Roman talking through you. But here it is. Listen to this. If acts could think, you'd see them move. Now that can become quite useful if I continue talking tonight and you continue listening, and in some way we happen to get in some sort of oral dance. All right, quick. If, let's say everyone's familiar with a dog, you're around a dog, if the acts, we're talking about now a creature of acts, a dog, not a creature of facts because he does not talk, has no talking into the intellect. If a dog suddenly wants to go out and an act could think, in the way in which I presented that maxim to you, that near 5D law of electricity and other strange things, the dog will do what? The dog will move. The dog will get up, according to, I guess, what you're used to if it's a domesticated dog that you have. He just simply stands up and does whatever your dog seems to do to get you to let him out. And it does not, of course, is not limited to domestic creatures. But what we are attempting to point to is that if acts in some way could think, which they can, or they'd be the world of facts. But if acts could think, there is a parallel. You would see them move. That would be the definition. That's when you would know if there was something comparable in the world of acts, wherein thinking does not go on, you understand? Wherein there is no world of facts. But notwithstanding that, we'll go ahead and say it, that if acts could in some way think, you wouldn't have to worry about being a mind reader. You wouldn't have to worry about, are you thinking about something, dear? Is something bothering you? In the world of acts, if they did think, there would be no doubt because they would move. That would be it. You would know that the act is thinking. That in a sense, something has disturbed the primary homeostatic condition of that creature vis-a-vis its environment, which of course vis-a-vis what the hell else? I just wanted to say vis-a-vis, I guess. Don't you feel better? But now notice this. In a collateral way, creatures of facts, when they are disturbed by the facts, what can they do? Now, oftentimes, by all appearances, oftentimes nothing. Because very often they become immobilized. Carried a little bit further in an institutional setting, they become so disturbed that they are adjudicated to be unfit for community presence. They're put away. They're called temporarily insane, or maybe more than temporarily insane. They become, from the middle of the bell curve of life, use in man, they become, at least at that time, inoperable. Because you do not have a similar, you don't have an exact parallel situation. That's why I was stressing the thing about the dog or any sort of creature that you could picture that would be in the world of acts, a creature of acts. That if acts themselves, either the creatures, or if you can just see this by now, if we can just speak of acts without a creature, if acts, being a kind of phenomenon of the primary world, if acts could do something that resembles thinking, it would be quite easy to see. You could not miss it. It would always manifest itself in the same way. The act would move. Something is disturbing the act, and its response to it is to try and change it. It will move. But wherein and here, if we're talking about, again, arbitrarily, but we're just isolating it right now for the sake of sketching this, if we're talking about a creature of facts, or even facts themselves, if you can see it, that facts find the facts disturbing. The question was, what can they do? Now, of course, the first thing that probably some of you would say is, well, they could think about it. True. Would not necessarily, as opposed to the world of acts, would not necessarily display itself by movement. Because you don't have to move to think. You can just stand there. And that becomes at times more symbolic than merely symbolic. It becomes exemplary more than symbolic. Because that is it's a description that's even used. I'm sure they have a Latin fancier sounding one in psychiatry and psychology, but there are people around at those little hospitals they have with fences and stuff that you can go into certain areas, and there are people who simply sit there all day. And it's not people, according to the hospital owners, the guys that work at hospitals, what do you call them? Mechanics, doctors. According to them, that many of these people, or let's say all of them in a certain ward, they are not sitting there immobile because their spine was broken in a toboggan accident. They would say, no, we cannot find any actual physical difficulties. Then the doctor might say, do you realize? And we'd say, yeah, we know over 50% of the hospital beds are taken up. How'd you know that? Well, but there they sit, and they're immobile. They have, literally, people have to pick them up and put them to bed, and there's nothing as they can find wrong with them. You do not have to go that far. All of you have had the experience of being immobilized, and not on the basis of acts. That may have happened to you now, because it happens like that, and it's over with, of being frightened, or somebody jump out and say, hello, I'm a mugger. And for a split second, but assuming again that you're part of the middle sane community in life's body of man, you do not remain immobile. You will act in some way if you are sane, if you are playing the right kind of self-preservation role. You're going to fight the guy, scream, holler, faint, take the creases out of your pants. But when it comes to this, you have all had this experience, except you did not feel necessarily at the time that you were immobilized in the sense that you had suffered an accident in the world of acts and had become a paraplegic. But you, in a sense, became immobilized that you're confronted with a personal problem. Do we have to be personal and go into it? I certainly hope not, but you know the sorts of things. Not broken bones, broken hearts. That sort of thing. Wondering what to do next. Not on the basis, I know it may seem that eventually you've got to act because you've got to act to live, but you may be confronted with what seems to be a crossroads in your vocational life. What shall I do next? Or in your social life? Should I leave my old man? Should I leave this woman? In the world of facts, you do not have anything as clear-cut as I was attempting to sketch for you, even as that kind of little theorem, that if acts did think, it would be always evident. Because if acts thought, you'd see them move. Whereas there is nothing of a true tracking similarity in the world of facts, because the world of facts can find the facts to be disturbing, and rather than act on it, can, it's not unusual at all, be rendered immobile. And I repeat one more time, I do not mean that you become catatonic in the sense that I was describing those people over in the E-wing, but it can render you immobile in the sense that you stay involved with this kind of, I think they call it in Nebraska and Florida, certain feelings of continuing ambiguity, a hovering dark cloud of uncertainty over my decision, that you cannot seem to make a decision as to what to do. And quite often, as we were mentioning last time, that can end you up, maybe not in the catatonic ward, but can end you up, according to ordinary city medicine, now, why would I second guess them, that you can become stressed out. You can actually become ill, you can end up with ulcers, high blood pressure, over what? Illnesses of fact. I mean, it's now an act that you have a hole in your stomach the size of some of what you would find on the tires of a 49 Buick owned by somebody in LaGrange, Georgia. Technically known as Maypops. That a doctor can look and yes, you have a hole in your stomach. I mean, why is that? Has somebody done a buttonhole? So it is now a fact, but notice, according to them, the illness came about on the basis of facts. Stress and etc. I will drug all that back in one more time to point out to you, to get you to consider that just generally speaking, there is no exact tracking parallel to acts. Again, that acts, if they could think, if they were thinking, would manifest themselves every time that they were disturbed by moving. That is, by acting. The acts find their current acts unsatisfactory, disturbing, so they continue, they act some more. But there is no exact parallel in the secondary world of man's intellect, the world of facts. Once you are a creature privy to the facts, then the curious, if not joyful, part that I'm hoping some of you can begin to see over the last few days, this marvel that now I'm a creature privy to facts, whereas my dog, as much as I love him, can never be. He will never know the facts. I mean, he just never will. Or my cat, my possum, my turtle, my brother-in-law, but that's another story. I don't want to go into that. But certain primary crude creatures. Yeah, he fit. He's not actually my brother-in-law, but I don't want to go into that either. In fact, I don't know who he is, but he hangs, well. So you can look upon your dog, as much as you love the dog, but you do understand he will never be in any way privy to the facts. And only a crude sort, such as my alleged brother-in-law would say, well, what facts? Any facts. A dog is never going to be privy to the facts. I mean, surely you understand that. There are no other creatures in the three-dimensional floor of this planet who are going to be, or who are privy to the facts. But then the curious, and I was suggesting, happy facts, is once a creature is privy to the facts, then they become disturbed by the facts. And notice, once you have become privy to the facts, you're a thinking, talking, modern, civilized man or woman, or brother-in-law, you are now above just the level of acts, wherein everything that seems to be disturbing you have to move on. It is literally at that level, do or die. Don't worry about dogs in their domesticated condition if they were still out in the wilds, as God and Alpo intended. It is the movement in regard to the disturbance in the environment is a do or die matter quite often, because they're only responding in their native condition. They will only be responding to what? Primary considerations. They only act in a primary way. They cannot react to facts. You cannot go out and find a wolf Let's say the wolf just ate, the wolf just got laid, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, and the wolf's just kind of laying there, and you go up and you say, hello. Wolf, doesn't bite you or anything. You say, by the way, have you seen the rise in unemployment figures for the first quarter of this month? And the wolf go, oh, Jesus, I didn't know. Why'd you have to tell me that? I was feeling pretty good. So you cannot be stressed, you cannot be disturbed by facts if you are simply a creature of acts. And so every time the creature of acts is disturbed, it is for a reason. Not that men are not disturbed for a reason, but they're disturbed for a reason that will make them move. When they're disturbed enough to move, it is, to varying degrees, a matter of life and death. Facts. There is nothing similar, not exactly similar, that's what I'm trying to get you to see, that you would think in a certain way, if you were an ordinary person, and we'll play this game again, and you heard some of this just for the time being, and you thought, well, this is kind of interesting, I'll play along to humor you people. And I said, well, wouldn't you think, once you see what I'm talking about, just kind of the fight or flee, that old idea of the animal kingdom, that's what a creature would be responding to, that's sort of what I mean, if that makes it easier for you, Mr. Average Intelligence. If that makes it easier, then I'm saying that a creature of simply acts, a non-verbal, a non-intellectual creature, would respond in a way that would make him move. Because whatever it was would be a quite pressing matter. Food, sex, danger in the environment. They might go, all right, I see that. And then I might want to ask, well, wouldn't you, after I point this out, wouldn't you sort of want to imagine, project, think that there should be something comparable in the world of the intellect? And you should think, yeah, because there's in a certain way we could bring up a whole scenario that the intellect defends itself. That there is a kind of built-in mechanism for people to defend themselves, or they would be stressed out. They would be killed, at least figuratively speaking, in the same way as the wolf could be killed if he did not move, if he did not act when the situation, when the acts around him became disturbing enough to make him move. If he didn't move, he could get killed by an encroaching larger wolf. Wouldn't you think? Because we could say that there is some kind of defense mechanism going on in the human nervous system, that people protect themselves, they cry, according to psychology, or they'll try to withhold their emotions when things get too stressful, or they'll turn to trying to put other chemicals in their brains that they can't produce to keep them, alcohol, booze, religion, all sorts of things. And wouldn't you just immediately think there's got to be something comparable? And I'm not saying there's not, but notice it doesn't resemble any sort of perfect tracking with the world of acts, because facts, contraire, the world of facts, or facts themselves, can be faced with disturbing, or them finding the facts disturbing, and rather than move in any way, just become immobilized. And apparently do nothing, apparently be incapable of doing anything. That is not, do not take that, but not even as, all right, a comma. It's certainly not a period, and it's not even a semicolon, because there's a more tortuous route, if you will follow this, from there. It's more fun. Who wants to straight drive out? I mean, you could have an old nice Rambler and handle that. Taking this a little bit further, could you see that a signpost of overall city progress, the evolution of humanity in the secondary sense, you could see a signpost being the fact that the more civilized a man is, the more uncertain and uncomfortable he becomes. I must admit, I assumed that probably saying uncomfortable might get a chuckle. That wasn't the point, because I could have used other words. But as always, it's like, if you remember, as most people will enjoy an exploding donut if you put a little jelly on the outside, and then you put the explosive device inside. I knew you all understand that. That bakery no longer exists on this planet, but I happen to know about it. the more, in a sense, quite useful sense, that a man and humanity, but a person is civilized, is the more he suspects, if not feels, but it happens here, I give you a choice, the more he suspects that he's probably malfunctioning. Think about it. Because I can defend that mother. I'm about to. The more civilized, I'm talking about in the full sense, the more educated, sophisticated, hip. Don't you find that interesting to think about at least for a second? That to be more and more civilized, since the world is more and more civilized, that the world is more and more run on the basis of needs for secondary activities than those who are most in line, most up to speed. They should be the most comfortable with it. Which I could stop and go along with that. But that's not worth anything. Because from a quite real, more complex perspective, it is living proof, if you can see it, of how civilized a man or a group of men are, and all of humanity, by the way, is the more that they feel, strongly suspect, it increases that they may be dysfunctional. Whilst apparently at the head of the secondary food chain, the higher up it goes, the more uncomfortable people seem to be. Educated, sophisticated, civilized, truly civilized people. It is a living proof of their degree of civility. To be uncertain. You might CF that with back to the world of acts. Compare it with the silent world of acts where there is no such suffering over, or no such hesitation, no such doubt. That you can compare if you, I didn't want to make real crude examples, but you can take the most civilized in some local community or any example you can think of a man with a PhD, political science or philosophy, and they're asking him what he thinks about some unsavory political, a war going on. And they ask a man, and here it is, and he may be the author of 4 or 5 books on warfare. He may have a degree not only in Pol Sci, but philosophy or religion. I mean, we're talking about a heavy-duty intellectual hitter. And he's got books he's considered from this one community, this one city. That he has done the greatest writing and research work over the philosophy of warfare, the spiritual, if not technological, balance in man's soul over aggression. Just everything they call the man in. And his whole state recognizes he is the intellectual authority, almost a moral authority, but he didn't pass himself necessarily, intellectual, on the kind of, at least humanistic morality of warfare and aggression. A civilized man, a man, may I say, with a tweed jacket and patches on his elbow, and probably a beard, nicely trimmed, and they bring the man on. And one of the signs, people do not analyze it this way, but now some of you surely already hear what I was about to say. You just never thought about it, but one of these signs of how civilized he is, not just intellectual, because he may make some comments around his field about yes or no, but the overall aura, if it's going to sell at all, of how civilized he is manifested, sometimes subtly, but it's there. He is manifested over his uncertainty. Look at it another way. Who is certain? The kinds of people who are, they say, are still around, and they're still around at least in your nervous system, if not actually on some island in the South Pacific. But you get down to uncivilized people. Why do I worry about the South Pacific? How about some of the East Hills of Tennessee? Well, you find people less and less civilized, you do not find uncertainty. Go down far enough, if we jump over that little artificial boundary that we've drawn out into the world of the primary world of animals, there's no uncertainty. Seems to always get up a laugh, but you know that. A lion does not look at a gazelle and is real hungry and thinks, oh, Jesus, I bet that gazelle's got a family. Or for it to go look for a lion's spiritual advisor and say, I'm still plagued somewhat. I feel ambivalent. I mean, I'm hungry. Well, I mean, I'm not starving. I could probably wait another day. But there's this gazelle over there, and in fact, I've seen her several times. She lives in the neighborhood. I don't know what to do. See, it always gets a little laugh because there is no morality there. Because it is not a world of facts. All right, now come up a little higher. You can take uncivilized people. You can picture this because it's down in your DNA and you can surely hear it resonating. But if you were dealing now with more uncivilized people, just people almost out of this, a few blocks out of the Stone Age, down in your neighborhood, you do know that they do not sit around. You can surely hear this. They are not plagued in the same way as civilized man over feelings of uncertainty. We're not saying right or wrong. They just do not. And of course, from a civilized position, they, just what I'm describing, would seem to be a kind of unsavory evidence of what I'm talking about because they can do things like kill each other. And you try to question them. Anthropologists come along, well, didn't you and your family kill about 20 people over there? Yeah. Well, why? And you find out that somebody stepped on somebody else's big toe 20 years ago, and they just been waiting. That's it? Now you look at the anthropologist like, what do you mean is that it? He goes, oh, yeah. Oh, boy, hey, I can understand. I can dig where you're coming from. But the point is, from a civilized position, you think, or you kill somebody over a pig's ear that somebody had carried in their pocket for 50 years. They're just, well, you know how that goes. So you would think that is, but there is no doubt. And if they try to question him like, well, don't you feel any remorse that not only we heard that you killed him, we heard that you ate him? He goes, yeah, I remember that. Well, don't you feel terrible about it? Don't you people feel terrible? I hear that you're just absolutely sexually promiscuous. Now, of course, they have to explain what that means. And the tribe goes, oh, yeah. And he looks at him like, you mean you're not? But they says, well, don't you feel, our gods, we don't believe in that. Tut, tut, tut. The less you are dealing with creatures of facts, the less you have any display, any experience on their part of uncertainty. It's a gradual step from the world, the silent primary world of animals, of acts. Just eat or be at. As you move into this gradual process of the nervous system, getting up here in demand, beginning to speak, and it produces and is the world of facts. Proof, a signpost of how civil, how advanced in the ordinary city sense a people are. Don't write me again about that. I still say, all right, humanity itself is how uncertain they are. This is back to where I left my example of our famous man with his. As they ask him about things, and without you having any occasion in the past to analyze it, there is a certain underlying, plus overall, kind of unspoken charisma around his uncertainty. And him being that country, that state's leading authority on war, the morality, the intellectual morality of war. For him, after making a few yes and no's and comments just to prove that he does, by God, knows what he's doing, it ends up the interview, even his books. It ends up with an expression of a kind of uncertainty. In a certain way, oftentimes, a kind of uncomfortableness. That the man can end up a 700-page opus on the questionable modern-day morality and need for war, and he can, evidently play pro and con and drag up all other authorities, and they get right at the end, and sort of his addendum or his epilogue is, after studying for 30 years, and I know that many of my books are considered works of art in their field, blah, 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 and I can look at it this way and I can look at it that way, and I realize that civilization must press on and we got to quit killing each other over such foolishness as, which god is the tallest and who's the best. And yet, after all these years, I still feel a certain discomfort in absolutely condemning those kind of men that in the past and even today will get out there and fight, will give up their blood for the sake of their family's honor or their religion's honor. I know that some of you readers may not have expected this from me, but there seems to be some sort of almost genetic voices calling And it's hard for me to absolutely condemn people when I just know somewhere that we have got to quit killing each other over these foolish, just over ideologies and religions, and yet there's still something that almost grips my little intellectual soul that I cannot bring myself to absolutely condemn them. Thank you very much. The end. That is taken. And we don't have to go that far, of course, because it's going on in you all the time. The more civilized, who is it, for instance, maybe I'm beating this to death, but it's just life does not have men analyzing it and looking at it this way. If you look down at a state prison, those states that now still have reenacted death penalties, and there's somebody there who's about to fry tonight or hang or do something, and it turns out, he killed his wife and children and burned them up. And so you'd think, from one view, if you're a good old bricklayer from East Tennessee, if you're a good old person closer to the world of facts, or if you can feel it down in your own spine, you know the voice is still there, it thinks, fry him, hell, they ought to deep fry him. But then you find out just before the night of the execution, there are all sorts of people out there picketing, waving signs against the death penalty. Now, you do know that you're not going to look out there and find a bunch of bricklayers. You know that, don't you? Truck drivers. You're going to find college professors. You're going to find, it's not occupations, of course, the point of education, but you're going to find extremely civilized men and women. At the very least, you're going to find middle class, and you may find, at least academically speaking, pushing at the upper ceiling of the middle class even. And if you ask them, well, don't you feel sorry for the family? Maybe he killed somebody instead of his own family. And maybe the people say, well, yes, I do. There's no doubt about that. Don't ask me. I feel horrible. But I just cannot believe that it's our duty. I just can't. I'm not certain. I understand the state, and we've all got to protect ourselves, and we've got to discourage people from committing these heinous crimes. But I'm just... Did I tell you that I have patches on my elbows in college? Well, yes, you did. Well, I must tell you, I'm not totally comfortable with the fact that we're going to take that guy's life, as terrible as the crime was. Being uncomfortable, being uncertain in the world of facts is a benchmark of being civilized. You might care to ponder, as long as we're at this pondering ponderosa, ponder it this way, that if indeed there was a exact parallel in the world of facts as to the world of acts, that is, when the facts would be disturbing to facts, facts would move on them, and it would be proper. In the same way, as I pointed out, that if acts could think, then you would see them move when they were disturbed. If this situation were absolutely applicable to the world of facts, I was going to ask you to ponder that such a straight, sure, and certain world, now speaking in the world of facts, the secondary world, so to speak, if that were the case now, as it is in the primary world, it would not be sufficient for what life needs in man right here in our solar system. It would be too straight. It would be too sure. It would be too certain. And I'm going to leave it at that. That part. Another aspect we've hit several times, the so-called, which I'm not questioning again, this contemporary age of information, the news age. Can you see that an increasingly significant part of news and information, you use them slash, fill in whatever you want, but a increasingly significant part of it is in the airing, or in the print, in the publishing, of people's reactions to events. Now, I mean more by events. Well, in a minute, events can be events of acts and events of facts. But right now, let's just say the world of events. It is more and more, the news is not just the event, but is humans' reaction to the event. They get the prime minister to make some comment. Suddenly they show someone threw a bomb into this restaurant in Athens. And they'll give a couple of seconds of that, and they'll show maybe what looks like either a toe or a piece of salami out from under the debris. But then they'll immediately switch to the prime minister, and they'll get his reaction. Then, if that's not enough, they'll go to people in the street. If it's America, of course, then they'll try to find American tourists. They're just passing through and say, "Boy, how'd you feel?" Of course, that's the old joke, and the tourist says, "What?" And so, well, that blast there at that restaurant where he goes, "Oh, I just got here." Well, how would you have felt if you'd been here when it happened? It is more and more, and it's no folly of the media or any of that, as I assume you'll see shortly. But it is more and more of comments. A lot of the news now, if you hadn't noticed, is taken up of opinion polls. They'll not only report wars going on or some failing of an economy, it just seems like every day it increases. Almost as much time is now given not only to reporting, let's say that wherever you live, your country is in some sort of armed conflict with another one. They'll report some of that, 20 people killed, and they dropped so many bombs. And the Prime Minister today says, well, I hate this has to go on, but by God, it's got to go on. And then they'll say, and our station, yours truly, me and so anchor, we helped put together this poll, and it's today. And they'll spend another almost equal amount of time saying, what percentage of your countrymen, your fellow man, says, yes, we agree with the president or the prime minister. No, we don't agree. 14 says, I don't even know who he is. 2% says, we're at war. And that's when they realized they were over in the trade union hall. Either that or accordion school. There's one for you. How do people in accordion school, how would they even know if a war was going on? How could they tell? But didn't you hear those horrible sounds going on? There could be some military use to that, but I don't know how. It's not my field. Well, I want you to see that part should be obvious, not me dragging out more examples. All you got to do is turn on the radio, look at the newspaper. It's in print and electronic media that it is just more and more, just continually. It increases. It's at least doubled in your lifetime of the reaction to events. That is, factual creatures dealing with facts will respond to what was initially acts, but they'll report the act, an earthquake, short for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, but they'll spend at least 30 seconds going to the prime minister, digging out the minister of public safety there in Sicily. They dig him out of somebody's bed, don't write me. And they say, how come you didn't have the people prepared for the earthquake? He goes, what earthquake? I just thought, I thought I was having more fun than I normally had. They will not only spend then 30 seconds trying to get the prime minister in charge of public safety to say why he didn't foresee this earthquake there in Sicily, why he was in bed with somebody else's wife. Not only that, then they'll spend another 30 seconds going out on the street taking a poll like, are you in favor of them trying to stop earthquakes and volcanoes? And 40% said yes. It's all the way from that to the continuing expansion of like politics, since that's almost the most popular secondary hobby now, the civilized people. Debate shows, discussions. They got all these talking heads, as they used to come on TV, discussing, not, the war is going on, or the economy is falling apart, or something's happened. And they'll mention the event is to get it going, but it's like just, a toss-up with the ball, is to get it going. And then you've got 30 minutes of these people telling their reaction to the event. That should be clear enough. Now, beyond all of that, it is not now, even as we speak, it is not now enough that men simply react to events of fact. It is now, may I repeat myself, it is now of an increasing significance in the world of info, the world of news, the secondary world of men, is now a reaction to other people's reaction. It is the prime minister, the political figure. Not only they show the bomb going off, they assume it's a terrorist, if somebody takes credit, they get the prime minister. What do you think? What do you have to say about this? And rah, 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 rah. Not only that, but now it's increasingly important and taken up by, not only that, so he'll get that out, 10 or 15 seconds worth, and they'll go, rah, rah. And they'll say, well, how about this? What do you think? You know, the head of the opposition party says that you should be held personally responsible because of your lack of concern over the terrorist threats that's been going on. What? So then he'll spend at least that long, if not more, reacting. In other words, follow the news. Don't blame the media. That's not the point. It's life-moving energy. We're talking about electrical matters, and I do not mean VCRs, and I don't mean the running of the tube that shows it on your TV. We're talking about the electrical energy that is life. So you've got, first off, the news themselves, those that are apparently moving the energy around. It's no longer just the events. Not unless it's real good visually, I guess. Like if they were really there and caught a 20-foot or 50-foot tidal wave, which is hard to catch that and survive and get the... But anyway, so they'll show her flying and show the volcano, or they'll show the horrible damage done by the terrorist bomb. But it's almost now that that's nothing. Just 10 or 15 seconds to show the blown out thing, and the voiceover say, so far they found 27 bodies, isn't that a toe sticking out there? They go immediately from that and spend just as much time, if not more, on somebody reacting to it. Either a public official, as I said, or if he's not all that sound-bitten that day and glib, they go to people in the street, so they do that. But then they go from that. Not only him reacting, well, this is a terrible thing, and boy, those terrorists should be ashamed of themselves. We'll get them yet. Horrible. So we got 2 stages, but now we got 3. Because then the reporters will say, you realize the leader of the opposition party has said so-and-so about what you did or didn't do. What? And so then he's, not only is it 1 step now from the act, it's 2 steps. Because he's not just giving his reaction to it. Now he's giving his reaction to somebody else's reaction. That, if you can see it, a bit more subtly, I will admit, but that also is a kind of benchmark to civilization. That which seems to be churning up and moving energy around within this civilized group is less and less of an immediate, in-your-face reaction to acts. It becomes more and more a reaction to other people's reaction. Of course, somewhere it all started with acts because of, secondary world without the primary. And of course, facts follow acts. And so somewhere, if you found these 2 college-trained, both of them perhaps with patches on their elbows, and you turned on the TV show, maybe the McLaughlin Report really turned loose, and you find 2 guys down there fist-fighting, and you find out they were fist-fighting over their interpretations of last quarter's economic reports. And so you say, well, that's ridiculous. They're fighting over something that's non-existent. They're not. They're talking, if it had to do with agriculture or whatever. Eventually, ultimately, there was an act, of course, caused this. But from one view, you could say, well, that's ridiculous. It's people like fighting over a football score. That is more and more the nature of how energy is being churned up and moved about in the civilized world. That it is almost living proof, if the more that people are apparently concerned with, debating, arguing, that is, moving energy around, on the basis not just of them reacting just to the acts. Because people still got to react to that. They've still got to ask the coach, well, how does it feel? You brought the team all the way to the playoffs, and you guys, that's the most lopsided score that has ever been in the NAACP or whatever it is. That's not it. NCAA. Basketball. That this is the most how do you feel? And he can say, well, now they're talking about an act. The game just got through and they're back there in the locker room. How do you feel? He says, well, you might imagine we don't feel real good about it. You know what the coach said, the opposing coach, before the game started? Now I picked out a hard one for you because it's easier to describe with politics and art and etc. But to drag this out, for the energy to get moved around, it has to even get somewhere beyond the world of acts. Of actually over what happened in the game. It has to become more and more. He said, well, and he starts talking about the NCAA imposed such restrictions on us because of those phony baloney charges they had about me and the recruiters. And you understand, he will start reacting to other things that happen. And it's not some kind of simple cop-out. That's not the point. Somebody could say it is. It is an expansion of the movement of energy. So that it is not just humans, it is not just a caveman, speaking archetypically. It's not just a caveman staying there and reacting to the fact that, hey, I'm about to starve to death. Or it's not just him reacting to the fact that he turned around and this big boulder just fell off and killed his brother-in-law. Well, somebody you liked. It's not just the act itself. To go from there, you have to have people now, the energy, that would not be sufficient. And so the energy now has been spread. It's like the investment of life has gone into other areas, and it's not just creatures of facts, man, reacting to acts. No, no, no. It is now more and more of significance, of necessity, that people, creatures of facts, men, are reacting to facts. They're reacting to the reactions of other factual creatures. That the Prime Minister is now spending the most of his time in response to this terrorist bombing of last Thursday. If you tracked what he'd said, not just in one interview, but what he had said to everyone, what the people, what the press, what his constituents, what his peers, what everyone seemed to demand, is not just a response to the bombing. It's more and more response to what the opposing party said about his response, about his party's response, about the government's response, what they should have done. He is more and more turning up energy, expanding it out to where it's a reaction to other people's reaction rather than to the event. In other words, it is a reaction to facts rather than to acts. Although the facts followed some act, they grew out of an act. But the specific is, he says, the bombing is a terrible thing. But I'm going to tell you what is worse, perhaps, in my mind, are these unpatriotic people who will now accuse the government of being lax, of me even being attacked personally, of some of the opposition saying that I'm almost a party to this. That's the sort of thing that us good Greeks cannot put up with. And so he rails on about that. And then, of course, somebody rails on about him about, well, you know, only a guilty dog runs. The debate can grow, it can keep churning up. And in a sense, you can say, wait a minute, I hadn't even heard the bombing itself mentioned in the last 2 days. And they can say, well, sure, no. Listen, our heart goes out to all the people. And yet, the discussion, that is the movement of energy, is more and more over reactions to other people's reactions, to other people's reactions, to other people's reactions, to the act. That is, it's factual reactions to other factual reactions, to other factual, on and on. And then, of course, you can always say, to some act. But notice that nowadays it only takes sometimes hours, and the act itself is almost a footnote. Because now, the lead story in the news is that the Prime Minister tried to punch the leader of the opposition party in the nose when he heard what he had said. And then they say, oh, that was about the bombing yesterday. That's almost of no great significance now. The real story now is the conflict between factual creatures. But the conflict now, the battle is going on in the world of facts as opposed to the world of acts. The world of acts did not disappear. The police, I know, are out looking for the bomber, and they're tracking down all that. But notice what seems to be of the increasing significance in the civilized world of man is not just the reporting of acts. They have to report that to get the story going. It's like picking out the key the song's going to be in, but then the song becomes about facts. Acts is just how to get it started, just to get it cranked up, and then it becomes, that's a horrible thing. And then somebody says, that's easy for you to say it's a horrible thing now, Prime Minister, but you haven't done anything up until now. How dare you say that? Somebody stands up over here, I agree with him. Well, who the hell are you? I wrote a book such and such. Somebody over here, oh, we remember him. He was in jail 20 years ago for treason. What? And the whole thing can become a great big game. It's a movement of energy. And you remember the bombing is now just, it was like blowing the whistle, tossing up the ball to get the game going. Since we got to conclude, may I not ask you again, do you not see that as being yet another example of primo efficiency on the hoof? You do not see life being its same old hard-nosed, super efficient self. If you don't, may I suggest that you stay out of restaurants in Athens?